Well, hello, and welcome once again to 25 o'clock. I'm your host, Dan Drago. Thanks for joining me on the show. This week, talked to Eric Krewson, frontman for the band The Chairman Dances. Eric and I met very briefly a couple of years ago at a So Far Sound show that we were both playing, but we have a lot of mutual friends, and Chairman Dances has a record that came out in late 2018. It's called Child of My Sorrow. It's outstanding, as are all of their records. There's quite a few of them. They're all out there on Spotify and Apple Music and all the places that you listen to music. It's all there. It was great to talk to him. Very intelligent fellow, a very thoughtful fellow, and a very great songwriter. We'll talk more about Eric and the band in just a moment. But welcome to episode 125. I feel like that's a number to make note of. Like, yeah, episode 125. Yeah, it's no 100 and it's no 200 and it's no even 150. But 125 is good. It's got like the 100 and like kind of the quarter in there. Welcome to the episode. And if you're new to the show, old to the show, medium to the show, you should check out 25o'clockpod.com. That's our website. That's where you get anything and everything regarding the show. You can download and stream all the episodes. They are free and there for you. You can join the mailing list. Check out the Friends and Neighbors page. It's where I link anyone and everyone who's ever been on the show. So if you like what you hear and you want to know more, go to the Friends and Neighbors page, click on the respective guest or guests that you like, and go to town or go to the internet. Go to the town that is the internet. That doesn't make any sense at all. Do it all. 25o'clockpod.com. And of course, you can find us at all the social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're all there. It's all there. Check it out. Who's tired? I'm tired. But it's fine. I just got back from Pittsburgh. Spent a little time out there, and it was fun. I had a good time. I ate some really great food, none of it involving sandwiches with coleslaw and French fries on top of them. I know that's the first thing everyone asks me. Did you eat a sandwich with French fries and coleslaw on top of it? And my answer is no, I did not. Because when I order a sandwich, I eat a sandwich, and then if I have French fries, they're usually to the side of the sandwich, as is the coleslaw. That's why these things are called side dishes or side items or side orders. And I'm not a sandwich purist by any stretch of the imagination. Put whatever you want on there, but like, I don't know, French fries and coleslaw, it's a lot. It's a lot to pack on a sandwich. It seems like someone who packs that much onto a sandwich and then eats it has different priorities other than just enjoying a sandwich. It's like they're trying to maximize the amount of food that they can shove in their face at a given time. And trust me, I have been there. That's not a judgment. It's a little bit of a judgment, but no, I didn't. I did not eat a French fry sandwich in Pittsburgh. I did eat at a really, really awesome Argentinian wood-fired steak place. They were great. And I checked out a really cool tiki bar in the Squirrel Hill neighborhood, as well as some cool record stores. I checked out a place called Amazing Books and Records in Squirrel Hill, as well as another place called Jerry's Records, also in Squirrel Hill. It was fun, but I'm back, and I think it's important as Philadelphians for us to explore the western Pennsylvania city, because we're the eastern Pennsylvania city. I think, it's important that we get out there and see what the other major city in Pennsylvania is like. I feel better for it. I hope you do. I hope you enjoyed my ramble about sandwiches and what to put or not put on them. I'll probably get more emails about the sandwich thing than about any other subject that comes up today, which is a shame. But let's talk about the most important subject to come up on the show today, and that is Eric Krewson and his band, The Chairman Dances. You can check them out at thechairmandances.com. They will be playing April 27th at Huber's House in South Philadelphia with All Boy, All Girl. I love those guys and gal. They have also been on the show. Nick and Danielle from that band. But they'll be playing together. And as of the recording of this, Eric and the members of All Boy, All Girl did not know each other, but I think that the two bands would go very, very, very well together. So April 27th at Huber's House, if you're inclined, in South Philadelphia, check out the Chairman Dances with All Boy, All Girl. You can get ticket information about that at thechairmandances.com. They'll also be premiering a video this week, this Thursday. I do not know what the video is called because as of the recording of this, Eric did not get back to me and tell me what the name of the video was. Now, that is not his fault. It is my fault for waiting literally 6 minutes before I recorded this to text him and be like, hey, what's the video called? So who knows? Maybe in between the intro and the outro, he'll text me back and I'll know. But this is not Eric's fault. This is my fault for waiting till the last minute to get pertinent information. So let's get on with it then. Now that I've blamed myself and absolved Eric of all wrongdoing, let's get to it. Let's get to my conversation with Eric Krewson of the band The Chairman Dances here on 25 O'Clock. Are you from Philly originally, or like from the area?
I grew up. Do you know where Kutztown is?
Yeah, north.
Yeah, in Berks County, the closest. So Kutztown and Fleetwood are the closest towns, but I grew up just basically in cornfields and rural areas.
Yeah,
among the forest,
barns and forests.
Yeah, it's a nice place to grow up.
Oh yeah,
enjoyed it.
Yeah, and then I imagine you gravitated here because this was the closest major city thing to go to.
First, for college.
Yeah.
I
Where'd you go?
To Drexel, which is where I met Joe for undergrad, and then I went to Temple.
Yep, it's a classic Philadelphia story.
Really?
And then you never left.
Yeah,
you got in at the right time though. Rents were cheap. It was a cool place to be.
I still enjoy it, and
yeah,
while rents are going up, there's still, I can live here and eat and play music, and that's what I need to do.
I think it's one of the last places one could still do that. So you grew up outside Philly, came to Philly. So that would have been
2004 I moved here.
Okay. That's when I moved here, actually.
Okay.
And then you started a band. Well, actually, let's go back a little.
Sure.
I want to go back before that, though, because I'm always interested in how everyone, generally a lot of people like music and they like to engage with music, but there's something that happens to you at some point in your life that kind of clicks it in a direction where not only do you really, really like music, but you would really, really like to sacrifice parts of your future towards playing music for others. Did you have a musical family like your mom and dad?
My mom played flute, and word has it she was very good, but I never heard her play. My mom also grew up very poor, and so she had a half scholarship for flute and a full scholarship for education and math. So she was like, well, I need to go to college. Yeah. So she gave up flute, but she did play piano a lot growing up, and my sister played piano, my sister played drums, my brother played trumpet and a little bit of guitar, but I was the only one who sort of got the bug for good.
Yeah. What was your first instrument? Was it guitar?
Trumpet.
Oh, okay. You learned how to read at least.
I still play trumpet.
Yeah, you played on the you played on the new record.
Yeah, I took
on all, or I imagine on many of the records.
Yeah, most of them. I think maybe all but one or two. But yeah, I took that. I studied through college. In college, I was in fusion bands. I was usually in jazz bands. I learned how to improvise. But I consider that the start of really my writing music was improvising on jazz tunes.
On jazz tunes, were you learning heads and charts and how to solo and how to play, how to listen and
absolutely.
Yeah. When did it start kind of moving more towards the songwriting and rock and things like that?
I think when I wrote my first song when I was, I think 15, and I made an album when I was 16 with my friend Chris Radway, who played drums, and he's still one of the best musicians I've ever played with.
What was that record like?
I feel like myself, and I guess everyone else, whenever you write a song that you're sort of starting over again, maybe other people don't feel that way. I always do.
Oh, like every time you write a new song, it's not like you're building off the other songs. It's like, here I am, back at square one.
Yeah, and there's what you did recently informs it more than other things, but Yeah, it's so if I think back to that first album, I mean, I don't want to listen to it, but in some ways, I guess there's some similarities. I've always liked a lot of different kinds of music, so the records I think reflect that. Like there's usually shifts in tones throughout the tracks, where it's not every song is the same tempo and the same instrumentation, etc. So I would say that if you look back and sort of squinted, you could see something what it might
like
be
sort of the proto version of what it would become. Well, I mean, that's definitely something that I notice in all the records is that you're doing arrangement at a different level of sophistication that like probably most rock bands. There's certain ways that your songs move from point to point, and now that you've told me that you went to school for music in some way, it informs that a lot more.
I did learn guitar that way, although now I'm learning more formally, but and voice too. But I guess there was a mixture. So I have like a ton of respect for that, and I'm involved in it too. But I guess just my favorite records always moved around a lot, So that's what I gravitate towards, even those rock records or what have you.
Yeah. So you started Chairman Dances in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have groups or things that you're doing kind of leading up to forming the Chairman Dances?
Yeah, I was always in bands from the time I was 16 up. I guess, let's see, I guess when I was an undergrad, I was in 2 bands. I sang and played guitar in one and was not the principal songwriter in that band. I wrote a few songs. That was very educational and interesting because that was the first time I was singing other material, consistently. And I learned a lot from that. And then I had my own band on the side. But then there was a period of basically my senior year in college, I did what everyone does, which is freak out because I needed to get a job. And I was working a lot too, and I was trying to graduate early. So I didn't, I went from playing out a lot to not playing out very much. And then I just did a 2-year program at Temple. And then in grad school, you can't do anything. You just can't do anything. And I was working for the university.
You went right from undergrad to grad?
Yeah. So I was a TA, and I was working, and I was taking some undergrad courses that I needed to take. And then also working. Right.
For money.
I had no time at all. So as soon as I finished, it was wonderful to just have any time of day,
You looked up and like, oh my God, what do I do with all this time?
Yeah. I mean, my quality of life went up quite a bit.
So you started the band, and what was I've listened to bits of like the first few records.
Okay.
And it's interesting. Yeah. It's all there. That's the great thing now, is that it's all there.
That's true.
Or for the most part, for most people, you've got everything up there digitally.
Yeah.
So we can all hear it. Not pay you, but hear it. And as I listen to those early records, I'm just curious what was sort of the general flow of like those first few records and playing out and things like that, because the first few records are very slightly raucous Americana type of sound, where I think of bands like Old 97s and Ockerville and things like that.
I love those bands.
Yeah,
we got to open for Rhett Miller 2 years ago.
Yeah,
that was great.
Yeah, that's definitely something I want to talk about, because it's sort of in the whole sort of narrative of Chairman Dances, like the way I sort of framed it out for myself, at least when I was making notes, was that you got about like 2010 to about 2015, where like you make a handful of records and they're all good, and you can kind of hear each one of them getting better and like growing as a band. Was it the same people kind of throughout all that?
2 people who had been involved for a very long time, Ben Rosen and Mike Juliana, are no longer in the band. Ben was in the group from 2010 until last year when Will Shores joined, our bassist, and Mike was in it for I think 5 years before he moved to New York. So there's been some turnover just from people.
General
jobs.
life turnover,
which
not acrimonious turnover.
No, they're lovely, incredibly lovely people and friends. But yeah, through that stretch, it was mostly the same guys. And yeah, I mean, I still love those records. I mean, Ockerville was a big influence on me, if only like conceptually, I guess, about music.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, they're a very I know this term has been bandied around for you in other interviews and for
No, that's
bands
fine.
like you too, but there's sort of a literary minded, rock music. And I think of bands like Ockerville, Sufjan Stevens, these very, very like heady, almost intellectual approach to songwriting, sort of that cross between a little less Iggy Pop and a little more Lou Reed type of situation.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that they're a good a proper extension of basically probably our favorite records from the 60s. I mean, that's why we've always recorded live, because I love Blonde on Blonde, and I think that record is incredible. And
it does all go back to Dylan, yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, and I'm sure you read the interview with Leonard Cohen that he did with the New Yorker right before he died.
Yeah, I did.
And he said that Dylan, they were in a car together, and Dylan said to Cohen, everyone's saying that I'm number one and you're number two, but I think you're number one and I'm 0. like he's like the origin of all. But I love their music, and I should say I don't dislike the term intellectual at all, because I love books and I love reading. But their songs have a great emotional impact on me, and good writing is very emotional. If you go now, I'm going to sound very pretentious, but I don't mean to be. But like, if you read Euripides, it's crazy. I mean, or if you read Ovid, Ted Hughes' translations.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not prim and proper. It's actually quite terrifying and violent. Not that I want to perpetuate violence.
Well, there's a lot of just all the gnarly bits of humanity. The good and the bad is all kind of out there. It's true. If you go back into the Greeks and the Romans all the way up to now, you still get that sort of like humanity laid bare for good and for not.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and that's what we're trying to do. I mean, we're not trying to paint a pretty picture. I mean, we do want art to be meaningful and beautiful, but it has to be true.
Yeah. But those first few records, what was sort of the flow of those first few years of just, kind of getting it together, making records, putting a band together?
I think in the beginning, we would play a couple of shows a month. We didn't tour just because we didn't get the opportunity for a few years. And it was basically, I don't know if it was a tacit or explicit goal, but I wanted to record once a year. And all those records were recorded with Joe or with Joe and Kyle.
Yeah, early days of the Headroom.
I met Joe in college, and we were sort of had friends of friends, and then we got together, and he was interested in recording us, and I liked working with Joe a lot. So yeah, we basically just wrote, played shows locally and a little bit farther in New York. And
kind of do what I call the I-95 corridor.
Yeah. Our lack of success made us record a lot, and I'm proud of those records.
Yeah. When you say lack of success too, you just mean like lack of like straight up someone giving you a bunch of money to do this for a living. Because those early records, I mean, just as artistic statements, I think are successful. Like you succeeded in making good sounding records that are coherent and are enjoyable to listen to.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I just, in that sense, I meant no one
cared,
really heard them, or a few people, and that's totally fine. I mean, that wasn't why I was doing it, and it's not why I'm doing it now.
Yeah. But it's true. There's always that other edge of it right there where like, yeah, that is not why you're doing it. You're doing it to express a thing in you and because you like working with the people that you're working with.
Absolutely.
And the trip itself of making a record, going out, playing some shows is fun. It's just fun if you're inclined. But there's always that other part in the back that's just like, but why don't more people know what this is? And you try and it's not about that, except it kind of is because it's a performative act. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Getting feedback and meeting people this way, and I've established friendships with people who run blogs. That's been a real boon and good thing in my life. Just being able to talk about art, and I mean that's led me to make art differently.
Yeah, you become friends with other musicians or people like that, and you just because they're no one's making a ton of money, and so you all just kind of. I often say, I'm like, well, I got paid and a lot of really good friends over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's great precedent for that. I mean,
absolutely.
Certainly in music, but even outside of music, I mean, Faulkner wrote the best novels when he wasn't getting paid to do. I mean, he was working the night shift.
So you're making records and you're playing with what I always like to call the medium level of success.
Thank you. I'll take that.
Yeah, or no, the marginal. I refer to it as I say marginal success, where people come and they stay and they don't. People aren't negative towards you, so you're just like, okay, I guess this is as good as it's going to get.
We did gain fans in that time, just slowly.
Well, yeah, I remember hearing about you at the time too. I think we were probably playing similar types of situations, you know.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, early Milk Boy, like early days of Milk Boy.
Yeah.
You're plugging along at kind of the same level as a lot of our peers, where, you know, you make a record once a year, you play some shows around, some are better than others, and you generally just enjoy the process of being in a band. And then somewhere around 2016, you were probably still doing everything that you've been doing the same way anyway, like even in regards to like your in-house stuff, like promotion and press and things like that. You tell me if I'm completely misreading this, but you were probably doing things kind of the same way that you've been doing it, and then at some point you looked up and like, oh gosh, a lot more people are paying attention than I thought were going to pay attention to this. Because in 2016 you put out Time Without Measure, and then you kind of looked up and it was like, oh, all these things that I revered now want to, you know, return my emails or return my phone calls type of situation.
Yeah, one of the nice things about just doing this for a while is that, you know, those people that you met a long time ago are still listening, and you didn't know that they were still listening.
Yeah.
And so you just sort of slowly accrue people.
You've built a relationship with them without knowing really the depth of the relationship that you've created.
So I'm skipping ahead to after this past record, or our most recent record, Child of My Sorrow, but I think a month before that came out, I got an email from someone who wanted to interview us, and he said, yeah, I saw you at a show in Bethlehem, PA 4 years ago, and then I saw you had an album coming out, and now I run a blog. But I feel like things sort of coalesced nicely, really from, I would say, the death of Samuel Miller, Samantha Says, and then Time Without Measure, and until now, people tend to care about our music, and that's a great blessing.
That's what you're going for the whole time.
Yeah, it's nice to be in conversation with people. I mean, the goal is not to be lionized, but to, you know, just to be in conversation with people is really wonderful, and I learn a ton that way. And
the type of music you make and the things that you're trying to evoke, I imagine, reaches thoughtful people, and so you get to have, you know, you can have fairly thoughtful conversations, relationships around the particular kind of thing that you're putting out there, and that's intentional because that's an extension of you, and you strike me as a very thoughtful person, so you would want to have these thoughtful interactions as well.
I think, yeah, people are great. I mean, if they're giving your album time, you know, if they're sitting down with it, I mean, that's an incredible thing today in 2019, which is no one seems to have any time. So the fact that they do that is humongous. And then, people have reactions to songs that I never would have thought, and they might be meaningful in ways I didn't expect them to be. So, it's great.
Yeah. I did want to talk about Time Without Measure, because I remember when that came out, and you put that out on Black Road Records, which is run by friends of mine, Ben Hughes of Night Windows. But I think that was probably how I really started paying attention to you guys, because like I said, I had heard of you guys. We were moving, probably we were in different circles, but kind of circles at the same level, just moving around Philadelphia in the 2011, 12, 13-ish area, kind of playing the same rooms and probably knowing a ton of the same people. This is a long roundabout way of saying, when Time Without Measure came out, I paid attention, and then when I kind of figured out what you were doing on the record, like what each of the songs were about, and each of the songs were about a different political activist in some way, even including, like, you know, the late President Jimmy Carter. I read in press you said it was all activists who were vilified, like kind of, they were not considered positively, some of the things that they did at the time. I often think whenever someone makes a cohesive statement like that, I always think, like, how do you piece that together? Like, does it start when you sit down? Do you say to yourself, I'm going to make a whole record where each song is about a different left-leaning, you know, political activist? or do you look up at some point and realize like I think this might be the theme that I'm centering around?
Yeah, that's a great question I always have for authors as well.
Yeah.
In writing school now, they teach you basically don't have a plan, just write.
I don't think that helps.
Well, I think...
I mean, it does and doesn't, yeah. I get what that means, which is like don't have a contrived idea of what this is gonna, don't know what the ending is going to be. But I think you have to have some kind of plan.
I actually do lean more that direction because it has to be, honest.
Yeah.
So what I did with that record, for instance, is I just started writing and journaling like I always did. And the first two songs I wrote were the first track, Dorothy Day and Peter Moran, and the track for Augustine or Augustine, depending on your tradition. And then I said, like, I guess I'm writing about some, like, weirdo religious people. And then as I kept writing, I was like, I guess I'm writing about weirdo religious people who were progressive. And then I was like, oh, this is interesting. But
even that right there, for those two, like even the first two,
right.
to be particular topics that one would write a song about is
right.
interesting to me as well, because I've tried to do that as a songwriter where I've been like, let's almost like a character study almost, and you take some aspect of it. It can be something almost like fleeting that you read in an interview or something like that, or it can be around like a major thing that someone is known for, and you just try and construct a song around it. I know from my point that I've been massively unsuccessful at making that work, but
yeah, and I mean, I was too, or I should say, it was an experiment. Most of the songs on that record were my second try at writing a song for them. Usually, the first time didn't work.
Yeah.
And then I sat down again and thought like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And I found something that was intriguing. And at the end, it was a good song. And that, or like it was a composition I was proud of and I thought was moving. And it was about someone. And I was like, okay, yeah, this
you got
is working
both out of that.
Yeah.
Like the music is good. And this is the idea that I'm trying to get across.
Yeah. Because I really love records and also like, song cycles. The more sort of like, let's say girth, but like the undercarriage of the song, the more there is to pull from, the better in terms of topic. So like the lyrics don't, or the subject doesn't stop with the lyrics, right? I mean, there can be hints in the music or there's backstory, that aren't in the lyrics, but it's still a part of the song, right? So the more sort of like other texts, to like quote Bart or something, but other texts that can like cross the paths of the song just provide more and more meaning.
Yeah.
So the more you can incorporate that, the better. And those people that I picked are pretty incredible, people who wrote a ton, and I'm still learning things about them. And
well, the fun thing about that record too is that people who might not be necessarily educated about and that's not to say, and that's not a negative dig at all. There's a lot of there's some pretty deep cut people on that record that most we didn't learn about most of those people in the school that we went to in life. But the songs themselves stand alone. That even if you're not familiar with the particular source material from song to song, in the end, you also just wrote a tune with a bit of a pop rock leaning to it, where you were also trying to appeal to that part as well. Yeah.
I wanted a musical composition that was good. I mean, that's the first first thing.
And that seemed to get some initial acclaim right there, which might have also been a result of people who were always kind of quietly listening the whole time, were there at the right time for you to put forward a work like this, which is, requires some more attention. Like even just as a listener, if you listen to it, you have to be like, oh, I should probably listen to this again and see what's going on.
Think of it that way. That's nice.
Yeah. And then you kind of looked up and suddenly you were getting some interest and some bites from places that you might not have normally thought would have been interested.
Yeah, that was very heartening. And it always is, but
I like that that's your attitude right there, because some people might have been like more of like, it's about time. But like everything I've seen you talk about it with, they're just like, yeah, I was incredibly grateful for that to happen at all, which is, I think, a very healthy attitude to have about
Thank
that.
you. Well, I mean, it doesn't happen like that all the time. And I mean, I'm very proud of that record. But there are, albums by bands that we love, or, art or novelists, and it's great. And that, for whatever reason, it just didn't pick up.
Yeah.
And maybe it never, there's a lot of great art that never will be known. So yeah, it's worth being grateful.
Yeah. So you got your press and some acclaim, and you went out on tour with Rhett Miller on his solo tour. How did you get hooked up with Rhett to begin with? I mean, I know you were a fan, but
I have to think about it. I'm not sure. We've had a couple of opening people who found us where they were like seeded artists, SEEDED.
Yeah.
To choose from.
Yeah.
I remember Liam Finn. Do you know him?
Oh, like one of the Finn brothers, or that's who I'm thinking. Okay. Oh, that was his father. Okay, because he was because Crowded House was him and his brother, and now I'd have to go up and find the record and pull it down so we can see what we're talking about. Crowded House was two brothers, and like the rest of the band, and Liam Finn was the son of one of the guys from Crowded House. All right, cool.
Now I'm being discursive, but I remember it because he's kind of an ornery dude.
Was father or Liam?
Liam.
Okay.
And he got the names of a bunch of bands, and he was like, "Oh, this is crap." And then he was like, "Who are these jamming bands? This band's weird. I like them." And so, and I think it was the same with Rhett, just there through connections with venues, etc.
Yeah. But going out on this tour, like suddenly now, instead of playing these little small club things with medium crowd attendance, you're opening for someone established. I imagine that had to have been fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was interesting. I was very nervous we've had the opportunity to open for a number of people now, and so my first gig and I still sort of over practice, but I was really nervous going on stage, and it's very interesting saying something to the crowd and they respond, and you know what I mean? Because everyone's listening. They can't. I mean, usually people are listening, but the bar is kind of loud.
No, I know exactly what you mean. You're in maybe not a seated theater situation, but you're in a place where people paid money to go see this, and the crowd who had got to see Rhett Miller would probably be a pretty with it respectful crowd who would pay some attention to the opener, and so for you to go up there and be like, oh, they're all watching. Whereas opposed to like playing a club where maybe half the club is watching and the other half is.
Yeah. It sort of takes some of the pressure off because they are, they're not waiting to be impressed. Although I should say that I've never really had, priggish people come to any show. But
I know what you mean, though. They're not. I completely get what you mean right there. Where it's you don't have to win anyone. I mean, you gotta put your best foot forward for if we're just going to throw out cliched phrases right now, but
sure, that's fine.
You gotta you gotta lead with your good stuff because this is maybe the only opportunity these people ever get to see you, so you'd like to leave them with a good impression of like, oh, that Chairman Dances band, they were great, so I'm opening up for Rhett Miller, type of situation. But yeah, you don't have to work against like the fact that like half the people there might be there for completely different reasons.
Sometimes we play, and this was our experience both when we played in Buffalo recently and in Reading whenever we play there. It's just a rough crowd, and then I love it because when we're done, people just explode into applause, and you're like, "What?
This whole time?
I didn't realize you were listening.
I didn't think you liked us at all."
Right? Yeah, exactly.
And so. Did you work on the Time Without Measure record? Was that with Daniel Smith? Or
yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which again, I'd talk about another really unique musical voice.
Yeah, Daniel's great.
Yeah, and like every project he's been involved in has always been very unique. And I don't know if it's him. I don't know a ton about him, but everything I've seen him on has always been like, wow, this is different.
There are a number of records I love that he produced, and it's interesting because they sound nothing like his music.
Yeah,
I mean, I love Sufjan's Seven Swans. I feel like that and Carrie and Lowell are probably my two favorite Sufjan records. And Daniel did Seven Swans, and that the credits list is just Sufjan, Daniel, and his sisters and his brothers.
Yeah. How did you sort of get hooked up with Daniel Smith?
So my wife likes his music even more than me, and I had been a fan of Danielson for a long time. I actually interned at Secretly Canadian, Jaguar, Dead Oceans. And I think when I was there, I found out about them. So I knew that I loved his music, and my wife said, "You know that he lives in New Jersey, right?" And I said, really? I did not know that. And she said, yeah, you should email him. So I remember I saw him play right after he made the record with Jad Fair recently, a couple years ago. Maybe 5 years ago now, or 6. And
I know, isn't that funny where you think it's a couple years ago and you're just like, oh no, wait, that's a long time ago.
Yeah. And so I just sent him an email afterwards and I said, I'm a big fan of your band. I run a group. I know you have a studio. I know you've recorded some records that I really love. Would you be interested in working with us? And he listened to what I sent him and he said, yeah, why don't you come over to the studio and we'll talk?
Yeah. Isn't this funny? It's like, it can be so easy.
I know.
What would have been to even probably your younger self, this seemingly unattainable thing, or like this insurmountable, was like, I can't talk to him. But in the end, as you get more experience meeting more people, and you guys had some confidence under your belt. You'd done a very nice tour.
I was proud of our music.
Yeah. But to get to a point where you realize that I can just talk to people and the worst thing they're going to say is no thanks, and then I'm exactly where I am
right.
5 minutes before I started talking to them.
I guess maybe because a lot of our favorite records are the same and we have a very similar work ethic, and he enjoys working with us, and I'm very thankful because he's very busy. He's a very busy guy doing a lot of stuff, so the fact that he's always carved out time for us because thank God he enjoys working with us too.
Yeah. Well, that's the fun thing too, is that you guys, no one's making any more or less money or acclaim off working with each other on that. But
right. Yeah.
But in those situations too, I know from producers, they're just like, I just if you ask a lot of producers oh, what's your favorite thing you're working on right now? 9 times out of 10, they're going to name some band that no one's ever heard of.
Right. Yeah.
Because they're like, I just like doing that. They're fun. We get along. It's a great, it's a good hang/working session.
Yeah. And Daniel, are also recording philosophy is similar in that I like recording basically everything live if we can, which is a lot to ask of studios because they're just not designed for it.
Yeah, some of them don't really even have the space.
A ton of, they just can't do it. So Daniel, when he asked the first time, so how do you want to do this? And I said, well, if we can record everything live, that'd be great. And Daniel just said, yes, that's what my band's always done.
Oh, that's great.
What I like
that makes
doing.
a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, because no one likes recording. I mean,
some people do. But I get what you mean. It can get incredibly tedious to be like, and now the bass guy has something to do for 2 hours, and now he has nothing to do for the rest of the record.
Right, and it's not exciting.
Sitting around waiting to sing, sitting around waiting to play the lead line or the piano line or whatever. I get that. Yeah,
and it can be enervating to the music too, because then the bass player's finally up.
He's bored or he's tired or.
Yeah, and he's not really paying attention to what the drums are, or he's just trying to nail his part, right? Whereas if it
is a very myopic way of doing a record, yeah.
Which can work. That's the great thing about art and music. Anything can work.
Combination of the two, yeah.
Right, absolutely. You can. I mean, that's why My Bloody Valentine is great because he's going to be in there and he's going to be crazy at the end of it. But you're gonna get a great guitar track
at expense to him,
right? But again, my favorite records, most of them were cut live.
Child of My Sorrow, you said you recorded almost all of that live.
Yeah, so I should say, yes, all of the the drums are recorded live, drums, guitars, bass. I used to record vocals live, and then engineers yelled at me because I play guitar, so you'd hear the string noise, so I stopped doing it. But yeah, some of the horns, even the saxophone in Half Mile from Allentown wasn't.
That's a great saxophone. Every time it comes up, I just listen. I perk up for a second. I'm like, yeah,
yeah. I mean, he did that. He did that live. It's a great solo. He did that live.
Well, I'd read that you had taken a lot of the a lot of the rhythm tracks and manipulated them electronically later as an experiment to see what that would sound like.
Yeah, same again on Half Mile from Allentown. So I had an idea that was just basically we would run the drums at the end when Kevin's doing this really brilliant sort of galloping figure, and I think that I was just gonna just manually move the high and low pass filter on the synth.
That's always fun to do.
Yeah, and it is. And then my bandmate said, "Yeah, but we can just do that in a plugin." But we already had the synth set up, so then we got pretty weird. And so at the end, there's all these sort of sizzling sounds, and it does not sound like drums in the least bit. But it added this really interesting texture. So we did that. I wrote, horn parts for myself and string parts. I played some vibes. So there were a number of overdubs. After we left the studio, I also took the record to Chattanooga. My friend Luke, who played on Time Without Measure, and then moved to Chattanooga, he wanted to be a part, so we recorded a bunch of tracks in Chattanooga too. One of my favorite moments on the record, it's extremely subtle, but in First to Leave, Will just plays a little bass fill, and Finn mimics him on piano, and it's just this nice, like, just tiny, just call and response moment, and they weren't even aware that they did it at the time.
That's just good. Also, because they're two great players who just instinctually would respond in that way. You hear a nice thing, oh, that's cool. No. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, and they wouldn't be able to do that any other way. If they were overdubbing, they would probably be like, well, I did that already.
I did that already. That's right. But in the end, like, the whole trick to pull off, despite all the different kinds of recording that went into it, all the instrumentation, all that, is to make most listeners not pay any attention to any of that at all. Like, or not to notice that at all, just to listen to the work as a whole, either as a song by song or as a whole record.
I think people of my disposition always want to add more, for instance.
Yeah. Well, you're an artist. Yeah, that's definitely.
Yeah. It's just an instinct. But it depends how it's all going to look or sound. I was going to say, like, look on a page or like a painting. Like, you don't want all of the colors. You need to have them in the right spot. So even though there's a ton of tracks, it's not 100 tracks playing. But yeah, just being able to write good counterpoint and knowing what's going to work with what.
Just to have that musical sophistication right there, where you just know, to be able to go to things like that, to have a wide vocabulary of music at your personal disposal, that's a great tool to have, and to be able to utilize it and to really refine the thing that you're trying to make. You get to take some more chances because you know a lot of the rules that people don't know, and in that way that you get to break them or lean on them more. Or sometimes in popular music, rock music, there's the anti-intellectualism of anything, not just music but art, political thought.
Yeah, I would say it's very superstitious.
Yeah. You don't want to seem like, for lack of a better term, you don't want to seem like a smarty in front of anyone, except that sometimes some of that music really works, stuff that's been very meticulously intellectualized and thought about.
I have a couple of thoughts on this. I rather recently, in the past couple of years, took singing lessons, which I never did.
Oh, that's neat. Yeah.
With a jazz singer, and she's wonderful, and it's been great. I think that there's this fear, and I don't know, well, basically how, like, poor people are always hosed, and so even if they're, like, voting Republican, they're still getting hosed in the end, right?
Yeah,
because they've been convinced that
to vote against their your personal interest in the idea that, like,
it will help them,
or that but one day when you're rich, which is, like, the biggest myth given to all American people. But go on with what you're saying about jazz singer, about singing.
Well, I think it's sort of similar in that people think if I take a lesson or if I learn something, then that won't be me because it didn't come from me, right?
And the idea of working on skill or craft, or even admitting, I don't sing as well as I would like to, perhaps I should seek some instruction in doing better.
Yeah, and I just wanted to write better. Like, I was always confident of my singing voice, and I was happy with it. I just want to be a better singer.
Yeah. Who wouldn't want to be better at the thing that you like doing?
Right. I mean, if...
God forbid.
Right. And I think that, good and smart punk musicians get that. Like, they can listen to John Coltrane records or Love Supreme and say, like, oh, this is pretty badass, right? Yeah. And he was studying and he was spending tons of hours a day.
He was practicing.
It is a great blessing learning these things, and I think that even people who generally have their head in the sand can respond to it and know that, okay, like, oh yeah, that's a good thing. Ashley Hartman, who's been, like, a satellite member of my band, and she's also just a very close friend of mine. She will always say, oh yeah, I don't know anything. I don't know what I'm talking about. She was in a madrigal choir in high school and writes the most incredible and complex harmonies and counterpoint that I've ever seen.
Because that's a large part of that particular style of music right there. And it's just inherent in her. I always feel bad when people say that, where they're just like, but I don't know what I'm talking about. And I'm guilty of it too when I'm in a room with people that I, like, if I'm playing with people who, like, study jazz or something like that. I didn't study jazz. Like, I can't play jazz.
Yeah, it's its own tradition.
Yeah. And I'll sit there in a room and be like, but I don't know what I'm talking about. And then I think like, but I do, because I can play the guitar and I know how to sing songs, and I do know what I'm talking about.
You were probably taught jazz theory, just not called jazz theory.
Yeah, I probably picked it up from people much smarter than me at one point or another. I mean, in the same way that when you actually go to like seek music instruction, either in a college like you did or just to go get lessons, you are working with someone who is smarter than you in that particular thing.
Yeah, that's why you're seeing that.
And thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God there's someone smarter than you. Because if there wasn't, then, oh God, this is the pinnacle. And then you just be like, that's not good.
No. And I mean, recently, I've been listening to a ton of jazz, and it's been very exciting for me because it's, it's not really a clear distinction between even rock or pop music. There's this group in the 60s called Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross. And they're doing a lot of stuff that, that sounds like, you could name people that they influenced, like Van Morrison, Jeff Buckley, other people. I mean, what is Nina Simone exactly? Like, what style of music is that? You could say it's jazz, it's kind of blues, it's kind of, it's kind of rock. But the musicianship is just so incredible on a ton of jazz records that I feel like you can learn so much very quickly just by listening. Yeah, and I think too, maybe this doesn't need to be said, but I feel like we moderns sometimes pat ourselves on the back a little too much. I mean, if you listen to music that was written a very long time, I mean, medieval music, it is very complex. I mean, it is more complex than our music.
Gregorian chants and just like tones and resonant
early
tones.
Polyphony.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, you just listen to that and you think about like, did they have the musical sophistication that we have right now? I'd be like, yeah, but it was different. Like they didn't write it down or pour over it probably in the same way that we did. Or there are people whose whole lives were devoted to nothing but literally doing that.
Right. And their resources were scant. And if they wanted to find a piece of music, they had to work pretty hard.
Yeah. Or you had to do it you had to be very good by ear if you heard something and then be able to go back to, I guess, to your monastery and be like, well, the monks down the road are singing like this. So what if we?
Yeah. I mean, they were the intellectuals of their time, and in different periods of history. Sorry if all the listeners are bored now.
We're going to cut most of this out. Don't you worry.
It's okay. In the Baroque period, basically all musicians could read every clef, and they could all play a ton of instruments. So, I mean, it was a different world.
Yeah. I used to think that you had to finish in a session, whatever that session was,
absolutely,
an hour, a day, or whatever. You needed to finish, and if you didn't finish, then you weren't you did not successfully write a song. And the moment I realized that was not true was probably one of the greater moments of my life as a writer, where I was just like, no, you can get halfway done, 2/3 done, or you can get 10% done, chuck it in a drawer, or I guess in my case, throw it in a folder in Pro Tools, open it back up in a month, and suddenly you're like, oh, I know what to do here.
Yeah, and I'm not sure why, but I had the same thing and same progression. Early Chairman Dance's records, most of those songs were written in a day.
Yeah, you had to finish, or else, like, you quote you wasted your time or something.
Yeah,
like that.
I don't know what the thinking was.
Well, it's because at that stage we don't really know. We're not totally sure how things get done, because that's a fairly shrouded part of the process, is the actual writing process. And there have been many great writers who've, talked about their writing process, but even that sometimes doesn't help.
Yeah, sometimes it's hurtful.
Yeah. And so you don't know, and you also kind of don't want to ask too much, because it becomes more and more clear that you might not know what it is that you're doing. And so you think like, oh, well, these things, just like I said, that whole idea of like divine inspiration, where a whole song comes to you at once you realize that is a myth.
Right.
It's like, it's incredibly freeing.
Yeah. And I mean, it could, but even then it probably won't.
The idea of, if you constantly practice it, just working at it, complete or not complete, at those rare times, that rare moment where like it does come to you all at once, you are ready.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and not to touch it. You know what I mean?
That's very important. Don't touch it.
Yeah, I mean, there's been so many times where, you have this idea, right? And then you say, oh, I want to finish it. And so you just keep working and you make no progress. And maybe by the end of the night you think, yeah, and then you wait a couple of days and you think, yeah, that first moment when it came easily, that's all good. Everything after that is not good.
We could pontificate on this for a long time. But awesome, man. Thanks for coming.
Oh, yeah. Thanks
for
having
talking.
me.
And the new record is called Child of My Sorrow. And I knew it came out late last year, so still around. And you're out there. You've got shows. But thank you.
Yeah,
thank you very
Dan.
much for coming and for chatting. And the record's fantastic. And
thank you.
Keep making more.
I will do that. I will do that.
Thanks.
We'll be together till the end of time. 25
Well, that's the show for this week. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you, Eric Krewson of the band The Chairman Dances, for coming over, for talking, for being a solid dude. He was getting over a cold when he had come over, or else he would have played. So instead of a live performance, I'm gonna play a track from the album Child of My Sorrow, which is the latest from the Chairman Dances. You can get all the information about that at thechairmandances.com. They got shows. They're premiering a video this week, and they're just making it happen. Check them out at thechairmandances.com. And check out 25o'clockpod.com for all the old episodes and the Friends and Neighbors page and the mailing list and all those other things. You want to do that over there. Going to play a cut from the album Child of My Sorrow from the band The Chairman Dances. This song is called Iridescent. Check it out, and if you like it, you know what to do. Go out there into the world, buy the record, see their shows, give them money and adulation in that order. Thanks for listening. My name is Dan Drago. This is 25 O'Clock, Philadelphia's longest-running music podcast, I think. And here's a song called Iridescent from the album Child of My Sorrow by The Chairman Dances. Enjoy. Catch you next time.
I sit beside him, monochromatic. Relief, well, I have seen her all iridescent. From her heel to her shoulder, all iridescent. From her heel to her shoulder. And daughters, they will keep you. Sisters, they might save you. Daughters, they will keep you. And sisters, they might save you. When I outstrip him, he turns to meet me. Relief, well, I have seen her all iridescent. From her heel to her shoulder, all iridescent. From her heel to her shoulder. Daughters, they will keep me.